Coming in at number 10, what if the Hulk went berserk? This one revisits the origin of the Hulk and how Banner saved Rick Jones from the Gamma Bomb explosion. But in an alternate reality, Bruce Banner takes slightly longer in his attempt to rescue Rick Jones and is unable to push him into the hole that shields him from the blast. In this reality, only his body shields Rick Jones and they both take a substantial dose of gamma. The result being that the Hulk and Rick Jones now share a psychic link, with the Hulk being able to feel Rick Jones's pain. This new unique trait is picked up by Thunderbolt Ross pretty quickly, who then uses the knowledge to inflict additional torment on Rick, hoping to lure the Hulk back to the base. Due to the torture and his radiation sickness, Rick Jones ultimately perishes and the Hulk goes even more berserk when he detects this, destroying numerous military helicopters and tanks in his quest to seek revenge for Ross. The Fantastic Four are eventually called in, but the Hulk takes each of them out single-handedly. Then Iron Man and Thor team up to fight the Hulk. Thor combines his power to control lightning with the energy channeling ability of Iron Man's armor, but they're amazed when they're unsuccessful in neutralizing the enraged Hulk, who eventually grabs Iron Man and crushes him in his suit like an aluminum can, taking Tony out for good. Thor then fights the Hulk alone and loses Mjolnir in the process. In desperation, knowing that he'll probably perish if he reverts to Donald Blake after 60 seconds without his hammer, Thor acts decisively and snaps the Hulk's neck, ending him in the process as he reverts to a lifeless Bruce Banner. At number 9, what if Iron Man was trapped in King Arthur's time? I'm at the bottom. In this what if comic, Dr. Doom leaves Tony Stark stranded in Camelot after a betrayal. Without high-tech gear, Tony uses Iron Man's skills to join the Round Table, defending Camelot with his solar-powered suit against Morgan Le Fay and Mordred. Things get intense when King Arthur and Mordred face off in a huge battle, leading to their downfall. And after that, Arthur names Tony Sir Anthony, the Man of Iron, as his successor. If you're enjoying the video so far, please support the channel by pressing like, subscribing to Top 10 Nerd, and ringing that notification bell. At number 8, what if Conan the Barbarian were stranded in the 20th century? Conan is temporarily transported to the modern day New York, but with help he finds a way to get home, and with the police thinking him a burglar, he runs to the roof of the Guggenheim and is hit by a magical lightning bolt that sends him back to the Hyberian Age. At least that's what's supposed to happen, but in this reality, Conan misses his faithful meeting with the lightning bolt by getting to the roof sooner and allowing the cops to get a drop on him. Yeah, that's right, Conan was apprehended but a handful of cops. Super underwhelming. But it gets worse. After a stint in jail, he soon becomes a criminal, though it takes him a while to learn the language and the concepts we take for granted. Conan then decides to start his own gang and recruits the baddest bruises around. They call himself the Barbarians and they follow him gladly because he has, quote, the spirit of a black warrior. I couldn't make this stuff up if I tried. His gang goes on a rampage, and when they finally rob a museum showing a Hyberian exhibition, finally some Marvel heroes take notice. Well, singular. Captain America. This brawl ends in Civil War fashion, with Cap convincing Conan to give up and the Barbarian walking away. After that, he invites Conan to become an Avenger. Will he or won't he? The Watcher never told us. At number 7, what if Spider-Man's Uncle Ben had lived? In this alternate Marvel universe, Uncle Ben stays alive because he's not bothered by nagging back pain. In a twist of fate, when the burglar breaks into the house, Aunt May investigates instead of Ben, and sadly she meets her end. This story takes a wild turn as Uncle Ben, feeling distance from Peter, discovers his nephew's secret identity as Spider-Man. Instead of scolding Peter, Ben encourages him to be the Spidey for the right reasons and not out of guilt, but to help others. Now things heat up when Ben confronts J. Jonah Jameson about his smear campaign against Spider-Man, and an intense standoff leads to a deal where Peter will tackle crimes for the Bugle. But soon all this blows up in everybody's faces, and that's when the Green Goblin goes berserk, kidnapping Jameson. Spider-Man swoops in, sorts things out, and even helps Jonah Jameson, who turned into a hulking beast. Eventually, secrets are spilled, forgiveness flows, and Norman Osborn's Green Goblin identity is exposed way earlier than usual. This is one of those handful of what-if stories that have an overall significantly better outcome than the mainstream canon for the hero and his supporting characters because, among other things, Betty Brant doesn't lose her brother, and the early and very public unmasking of the Green Goblin gets rid of a plethora of trauma in Spider-Man's life. At number 6, what if Wolverine had eliminated the Hulk? In this alternate Marvel universe, this reality diverged during the battle between Wolverine and the Hulk. In this reality, Wolverine disobeys his order to capture him and instead takes him out. But that move set off a chain reaction of chaos that would ultimately lead to Wolverine's own demise. See, after this, Wolverine, feeling like the big shot, ends up accidentally ending an innocent person in a bar brawl. Then when his boss, James Hudson, says he has to face his consequences, Wolverine bolts. Magneto and his gang, the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, swoop in to scoop him up. Now eventually Eventually, he flips sides and joins the X-Men to take down the Brotherhood, but in the showdown with Magneto, things turn tragic as Magneto tricks Wolverine using his metal powers to turn Wolverine's own claws against him. The result being that Wolverine meets his end by getting skewered with his own claws.
Number 5, Man Spider. Okay, so in this story, everything that happens to Spider-Man is exactly the same. Oh, except I left out the extremely important detail that in What If number 8 in 1978, this isn't Peter Parker, it's actually Webster Weaver, an anthropomorphized spider in a world of other animal people. Oh, yes, and he gets bit by a radioactive human, giving this spider the proportional powers of a human. Apart from that, and the villains being hilarious alternate versions like Marvin the Hunter, Culture Vulture, Rude Rhino, the Green Gobbler, King Pig, Octodoctopus, and Leaping Lizard, everything is just the same as it always is, until one day Reyes, the bug spray baron, threatened to destroy the ozone layer unless he was given $1 trillion. It turns out that Reyes is actually the guy who defeated Webster's Uncle Ben, or Uncle Bug as he's called in this comic. Man Spider saves the day, Reyes is destroyed, and he swings back home to Aunt Mayfly. It's lovely. Number 4, the Fantastic Four with different powers. The Fantastic Four are known as the first family of Marvel Comics. Reed Richards, Sue Storm, Johnny Storm, and Ben Grimm combine great intelligence, sterling courage, and a staggering array of powers, making them one of the most powerful superhero teams in comics, and also one of the best families around. 1977's What If number 6 shakes things up by reimagining a world where the four acquire different sets of powers. This sets them on a dramatically divergent path. The story sees Reed, Susan, Johnny, and Ben subjected to the cosmic radiation that fans know gives them their powers, but this time around, Johnny becomes a living robot, Ben sprouts giant dragon wings, and Susan gains the ability to stretch her body to great lengths like Reed could. Reed? Well, he kinda draws the short straw. He's transformed into a bodiless brain. The explorers band together as the Fantastic Four, but Reed's nature as a disembodied organ kinda leads to some problems, as you might suspect. Susan grows closer to Ben instead of Reed, and Reed despairs of ever getting her to love him again. Dr. Doom soon takes advantage of Reed's state by stealing him away for his own ends. Now, after a thrilling battle, Reed and the others manage to overcome Doom. Reed also manages to transfer his mind into Doom's body somehow. This means this new Fantastic Four consists of a winged Ben Grimm, stretchable Susan Storm, metallic Johnny, and Reed alive in the body of Dr. Doom. Kinda crazy. Number 3, Wolverine Punisher. What about the What If where Wolverine became a kind of Punisher? In this story, we're in 1920s Canada, following a Wolverine who doesn't seem to actually have claws, or if he does, he barely uses them. He does seem to have his healing factor and senses though. Whatever his powers are, we find out he has a son with a lady who, works at a bar. He is forced to take responsibility for both of them and makes friends with the barkeep. But that all comes to an end when they are all brought to an end thanks to a fire caused by a man named Scarface who fled to Chicago. Now obviously Logan isn't going to just let that go. He tracks down the villain, and with the help of his friend, and all while wearing a skull and crossbone flags on his chest, he wields big bang booms and never pops his claws if he actually has any, but he looks totally amazing as he takes that guy out. It's also an incredibly weird twist on a version of Punisher, but admittedly a little more disappointing than I might have expected it to be, and I'm sorry if you get disappointed by it. Number 2, Hassenwald. Honestly, I'm not even sure how this makes sense, but in this What If comic, Marvel exists as a comic book company that writes all the same comics it normally would, including comic books about Ghost Rider Robbie Reyes, and that's important because he also happens to be an intern at Marvel, but is also still Ghost Rider. I don't know how it works. I never said these things need to make sense. What is honestly even weirder than that though is that the studios of Marvel are being visited by this Nordic death metal band called Hassenwald from Latveria, who have fun clubs all over the world, including in Wakanda. Oh, and they also have been accused of witchcraft, church burning, and eating people, which turns out to be true, as while they are visiting Marvel, they take out the donkey that runs the printing press and use it to create a possessed Ghost Rider comic that turns the world into a hellscape, making them the ultimate rulers of it, using the power of the old gods to do so. I don't know. Now, Robbie Reyes is trapped in this world where Hassenwald has dispatched the Marvel Universe and he needs to save it, I think? I don't know. After reading it though, I needed to sit down, so. And finally, in at number 1, Thanos joins the Avengers. In 2015's What If Infinity Thanos number 1, we meet a version of the Mad Titan who willingly teams up with the Avengers to take down the Builders, a race of super beings from another reality who wish to end the universe. Of course, Thanos' desire to become one of the Avengers ultimately turns out to be self-serving, but Captain America realizes this too late and he falls in battle to the Purple Menace. Thanos tells the other Avengers that Cap passed at the hands of the enemy, which the other Avengers accepted. He becomes a solid part of the team, albeit one kept hidden from the rest of humanity. Now, Thanos' mere presence appears to infect the other heroes with this kind of evil persona. In the story's epilogue, we see Tony Stark, Reed Richards, and Doctor Strange mulling over the possibility of beings like the Builders attacking them again. Now, this is when Thanos makes his presence known once more. He offers to help Earth's heroes destroy other worlds in the name of defending their own, kind of like in the Incursions. Kind of a downer. Number 10, Norman Osborne with the Infinity Gauntlet. In the What If Infinity Dark Reign story, Norman Osborne, after becoming the director of Hammer and the Dark Avengers after the Civil War event, figures out how to get his hands on the Infinity Gauntlet, defeating the Illuminati and all the heroes and becoming the Goblin King. Now, using the gauntlet, he creates a world completely under his own tyrannical rule, and he teleports his horrible and aggressive father from the past to show him all the things that he has accomplished in a really sad attempt to get his father's love and admiration, something he never really had as a child and still doesn't even have it now. His father begins to bash him for becoming a tyrannical ruler, which is a little worse given the fact that it was kind of his father's fault that Norman even turned out this way. Teleporting them both back to the Dark Avengers base, Norman finds out that the entire team has been destroyed. As Norman is trying to figure out what happened, it's revealed that Thanos has shown up to collect the gauntlet in his awesome Thanos fashion. Unfortunately, not even the Mad Titan is a match for someone wielding the gauntlet, and he is dispatched, but not before he warns Norman that he is trying to get the love of someone who he will never get it from. His father. After Thanos is gone, Norman's father, being forced by Norman and the Infinity Stones, begins to tell Norman how great he is, and Osborne just kinda loses it, wiping his father from all existence, all time, and all space. Which was dumb, because now Norman Osborn's existence is a paradox and he, and this world that he created, fade into nothing. Number 9, all the power, no responsibility. In this What If number 19, Peter Parker makes the simple decision of stopping the robber who would go on to take Uncle Ben's life all the way back when he first encountered him and canonically did nothing. That simple change of the story robs Peter of the lesson of great power means great responsibility, and instead he turns to a life in the public eye. Now as an actor, Peter turns his focus towards making films and protecting his reputation at almost any cost. He becomes the publicist for both the Avengers and the Fantastic Four, as well as Daredevil, all while still retaining his Spider-Man persona. He even gets a cool cape for a tiny little bit. I mean, it's cool to me, I don't know. It's really not that cool. When J. Jonah Jameson exposes him to the public though, we see quite a bit more of an edge to this Spider-Man. Spider-Man threatens him and even eventually ends his career, which comes back to bite Peter when Jonah forms the Sinister Six, including himself. It's only after Daredevil jumps in to save Peter and fight the villains that Peter does actually learn the old power and responsibility thing. Number 8, what if Aunt May passed on instead of Uncle Ben? Ready to be depressed? Great, because in this What If story we are given a first-hand look at what happens to Peter if Aunt May was the one to lose her life instead of Uncle Ben. Peter, fueled by rage, goes after her killer and ends his life, but unexpectedly Uncle Ben shows up and he takes the fall for Peter, going to jail. Now, Peter is going through life with no real moral center to help guide him, and he hates the idea of being Spider-Man. He becomes a bit of a troubled kid, he goes to a juvenile prison, escapes, lives on the street, and when he is almost at his breaking point, he tries to break Uncle Ben out of prison. Now instead of going with him, Uncle Ben convinces Peter to make Aunt May proud. Peter takes it to heart, he fixes his life, he meets Mary Jane, he focuses on school, being a hero when the world really needs him, and eventually Ben gets out of prison on good behavior, and that's when we finally get the power and responsibility speech, which leads to Peter becoming Spider-Man more permanently, and with Uncle Ben as like a Spider-Man version of Bruce Wayne's Alfred. He goes on to become the hero that New York deserves. Nice. Number 7, intelligent design God Hulk. Most comic book readers, and especially fans of Marvel and the Hulk, know of the storyline where the Illuminati banished the Hulk from Earth to send him to another planet. Now he ended up crash landing on Sakaar and became a gladiator turned liberator turned ruler of the planet until his ship self-destructed, wiping out his family and bringing him back to Earth as one of the most powerful and angry versions of the Hulk ever. Well, in What If Planet Hulk, it ends up asking the question, what if the Illuminati's banishment had hit its original target? Because of an unforeseen anomaly and Bruce kind of losing his mind, in the main Marvel universe, Hulk was thrown off of his original course, which is what got him wound up on Sakaar in the first place. In this story, Hulk lands on the incredibly peaceful and serene planet that he was intended to, and sure, he goes a bit ragey at first, but he eventually realizes the planet is inhabited by a race of peaceful tiny little creatures, and they're super cute. Over long periods of time, the Hulk helps this race to evolve and survive against the threats of this planet, and even become a thriving civilization kinda similar to humans. They end up viewing the Hulk as their god, and he basically acts as one, leading them to wealth and prosperity and keeping them safe. Number 6, the world knew Daredevil was blind. One day, when fighting against Electro with Spider-Man, Daredevil is unaffected by a blinding flare set off right in front of his face by Electro. Now this event kinda clues in Electro to the idea that maybe this Daredevil guy is kinda blind. And when Electro and Spider-Man ask Daredevil what color Electro's costume is, it kinda seals the deal. Electro lets the whole world know by leaking this info to the Daily Bugle after Spider-Man actually sorta makes fun of Daredevil, which is mean. Saying it makes sense why he chose the yellow costume because he obviously couldn't see how bad it was. Damn, Spider-Man. The villains then begin to take advantage of this massive secret weakness for Daredevil, and while he is able to hold his own still, he eventually decides to undergo an experimental treatment that restores his sight but removes his super senses. Now, powerless, Matt Murdock and Karen Page get married and have a normal life, with Matt becoming the district attorney. So it did actually turn out pretty good in the end. Superior Spider-Man figures out that Spiders-Man is involved, and he captures one of his spiders in a wave disruption field, which basically means Spiders-Man's consciousness is trapped in the one single little spider. This is when Otto forces the truth of who is behind this all out of the tiny little spider, and Norman, on the other hand, was hiding out in a completely different world. So, in order to go defeat him, Otto at Horizon University is attempting to use a dimensional viewer when Norman, who had actually traveled to Earth 616, turns it on, turns this all on its head, blowing up the machine and taking down a large part of the building as well, with Otto's friends and even his love interest inside. He then vows to destroy everything Otto has ever built, simply for insulting him, which is a very Norman Osborn thing to do. So now it's Norman Osborn Spider-Man versus Otto Octavius Spider-Man, and it's something I actually didn't know would be so awesome. It's cool. Norman ended up capturing a boy by the name of James, who Superior Spider-Man had saved and grown close to. With Otto begging Norman to spare the boy, Spider-Norman does a very Norman Osborn thing and offers an ultimatum. He gives Otto the choice of either taking the lives of 3 innocent, healthy civilians, or he will end James forever. This leads Otto to actually summon the demon Mephisto and make a deal with him. For Otto to revert himself back to the villain he used to be in order to have the ruthless will he needs to actually defeat Norman properly. When these two encounter each other, Otto has infiltrated Norman's place, sicked his Octobots on Spiders-Man, and used a clone of his spider self to trick Norman into a false sense of security. I hope that makes sense. As Norman throws James out of a window, Otto reveals that he summoned a bunch of his old octopus harnesses, and while one of them saved James, 4 others and Otto himself beat the heckin' tar out of Norman Osborn, systematically breaking his bones with the arms in such a way that they will never heal back normally, trapping Norman in a broken body. Otto steals the piece of web of life and destiny that Norman was using, and he tosses Spider-Norman back to his native Earth, Earth 44145. Now, the next time we see Norman is in Spider-Man Volume 4, Issue number 4 from this year, 2023. For a little bit of an explanation, in this story, Peter Parker and his allies, which weirdly enough includes Morlun for some reason, are fighting against the Wasp totem known as Shathra, who is trying to dominate the web of life and destiny, or basically just the multiverse. Using her sting, she's able to convert people into a part of her hive, and she's doing that to a whole bunch of different Spider-Men across the multiverse. As a little fun fact, her forces also possess the dagger totem, which can completely erase someone from existence, which is what happened to 616 Spider-Man. Now, opening the story on Spider-Norman's Earth 44145, he and Spider-Man are attacked by Spider Biodroid of Earth 9221 and the Spider Rex, yes, a Spider T-Rex of Earth 66, both of whom had been forced into Shothra's hive. Norman and Spider-Man are hiding away in Norman's lab. As Norman tries to use the only piece of the web he has left to escape, he orders Spider-Man to try and attack the alternate spiders. Now, I'm not gonna lie, Spider-Man goes down like a chump, getting completely set ablaze by Spider Biodroid. The pair bust into the lab to find Norman, who didn't actually escape. Instead, Norman sent his part of the web, which is what Shothra was after, away to Earth 616, and then, refusing to become a part of the hive and wanting to win on his terms, Norman blows up the building with himself inside.
The story starts off with our mutant resistance gathered seemingly in an ongoing final stand for their survival. As they prepare to fight, they tell stories of how they all came to be there and how much they lost and sacrificed along the way. The first story recounts the origin of Basilisk. This reality is Cyclops. Here, Basilisk was a prisoner held at Alcatraz. There, mutants are basically held on death row, sentenced to die just for existing. In Basilisk's case, he wasn't actually on death row, or wasn't really on death row in the same way. Instead, he actually acted as their executioner. Arcade, who runs the prison, basically ordered to have Basilisk's eyelids removed and created a visor with their own controller so that the prison could use him to exterminate the other mutants. Fortunately, Basilisk managed to use the controller to unleash his powers himself, using them to kill all the guards and Arcade, who ran the prison. While he told the other prisoners to flee, Basilisk stayed on, prepared to stand and fight. No one really knows fully how he escaped. Also, yes, if you haven't caught on, Basilisk is Scott Summers in this reality. We also learn the story of Sam Guthrie, aka Cannonball, and Paige Guthrie, aka Husk. After their family was rounded up, they managed to evade capture and tried to track them in transport trucks. However, by the time they did catch up with the guards who were moving them, it was already too late. It seems their folks were not actually captured alive, but instead were killed in the ensuing chaos. Husk swears revenge on the people who took her family from her, and Cannonball attempts to subdue his sister, instead offering that they build a place that they can call home. We also learn of the Doctor's backstory. Dr. Rao is a human, it's true, but she chooses to stay with the mutants after her own people turned on her when she stood up against leaking a cure for the X gene into the water supply. Wolverine was tasked with stopping the leak from happening, and Rao revealed herself as his informant. She helped to destroy the cure by administering the only dosages that they had left, a small batch, into him, so his healing factor could basically metabolize it. The only way to actually destroy the cure on short notice, as there were reinforcements en route to the lab. However, when Wolverine asked afterwards to be killed as the cure had suppressed his healing factor, causing the poisonous adamantium coating on his bones to take effect, Rao refused. After fighting back against one of her former colleagues in the lab and killing him, she couldn't bring herself to take another life. I mean, after all, she is a doctor. She blames herself for much of what has happened to the mutants, as she was one of the scientists who worked to remove their X gene, whether they wanted it or not. Well, initially it was because people said they wanted it, but then they were wanting to take that cure and give it to people forcibly. She was like, wait a minute, it's not what I thought we were doing. Next, we learn of how Magneto became the leader of this resistance. Toad in this universe is the one who takes us into this story. He recounts a time when the last of the mutant resistance were basically holed up in the Chrysler building. They believed that Magneto had perished, but he and Mystique managed to infiltrate their way into this final stand, putting themselves between the human forces and the mutants that were left there. While non-ferrous exonyms, this world's version of Sentinels, were on their way, Magneto simply told the forces that if they stood down, none of them would actually need to be harmed. You see, his plan was to simply save and relocate his people that were holed up there, which he did by literally moving the city's buildings using his powers. Well, not all of them, but that obviously kind of became the legend. He moved all the ones with enough steel in them for him to actually manipulate them and move them with his powers, with the buildings flying right over the militia's heads. Wow. What a sight. What an epic moment. Magneto becoming leader, just being like, gonna move all these buildings. 1,000 days after all the last surviving mutants came together, seeing the buildings as a beacon and gathering to Magneto's side, the fight continues on. It's been almost 3 years, and every day is an intense battle. We learn that Magneto, as leader of the last surviving mutants, has his own elite force, his own version of the X-Men, seemingly. Prominent members among them include Cannonball, who seems to be the team's tactical leader in this reality, and Legacy, the name Rogue chooses to go by in this reality. However, there is another name for Rogue here as well that she doesn't so much like, the Reaper. Now this is because when mutants die, as Tempo does here, Legacy absorbs the mutants into herself, killing them by draining their life force with her touch, but also using her powers to absorb their own mutant abilities and their memories, so they will always live on. So when mutants are on their deathbed, rather than just die as they would, Rogue gets to basically keep them within her, and so their memories continue on.
The problem for Peter Parker really came with the Green Goblin, like I said before, who continued to be Peter's most vicious and persevering villain. Goblin learned how to nullify Peter's spider sense, which led to the villain being able to follow Peter and learn his identity. He managed to capture Peter, and he revealed himself as Norman Osborne as he challenged Peter to a fight, minus the spider's usual firepower. But Peter used the building around Norman as his firepower and brought him down, but importantly, not for good. While Norman was no longer an active threat and suffered from amnesia that kept Spider-Punisher's identity secret, Peter couldn't bring himself to end the guy's life. But it only took a short while for Norman's mental instability to rear its ugly head yet again, also restoring his memory and setting him on a path for revenge against Spider-Punisher and Peter Parker, who are one and the same person, as we know. This revenge came in the form of trying to end the life of Peter's girlfriend, Gwen Stacy. Now Peter knew that unless the threat of the Goblin was ended there and then, none of his loved ones would ever be safe. So one armor-piercing projectile followed by 2 Teflon-jacketed ones finally put a stopper to the issue of the Green Goblin. And unlike his 616 counterpart, Spider-Punisher was actually able to save the life of Gwen Stacy, reviving her after she had a pretty rough, web-softened impact on some scaffolding, instead of her getting the old snap courtesy of Peter's webs and physics. The passing of Norman Osborn set a reaction in Harry Osborn to seek revenge against the Punisher to, as he puts it, quote, punish the Punisher, but that didn't actually get followed up at all in the book. But Gwen and Peter were able to save their relationship and become a successful couple. But the fact that Peter almost ruined the relationship by keeping his Spider-Man life a secret from Gwen led him to give it up entirely. Peter ripped up his Spider-Punisher costume and left it in a garbage can down an alleyway. But just like before, Spider-Punisher's absence only brought a rise in crime once again. A conflict between various different mob families, including the Costa family, broke out. Now a banker and money launderer for the Costa family named Forrest Hunt, who had been skimming profits off the top from the family, had been captured and held up in Central Park. At that same time, highly decorated Marine veteran Frank Castle and his family were flying kites in the park and just happened to stumble upon Forrest and the Costa family goons as they were showing Forrest the error of his ways. In an unfortunate turn of events, the Costa family turned their sights on Castle's family and wiped them out, leaving Frank battered and barely alive. As he fled the scene completely heartbroken and distraught, he stumbled into an alleyway and knocked over some garbage cans and laid on the ground as the Spider-Punisher's suit fell out and landed right on top of him, giving Castle the idea to become the new Punisher in this alternate world.
At number 5, what if the Dazzler had become the herald of Galactus? The Dazzler is a mutant with the power to turn sound into light, but what if she gained the power cosmic? In this what if tale, Galactus, the cosmic entity that devours planets, chooses Dazzler as his herald after banishing his previous one, Terrax. Initially unwilling, Dazzler agrees to spare Earth from Galactus' hunger. But then instead of leading Galactus to inhabited worlds, Dazzler guides him towards empty planets hoping to save lives. Over time, she even manages to awaken some feelings in the usually stoic Galactus. However, things take a turn when aliens seeking revenge for their planets attack Dazzler using Terrax's axe. Galactus retaliates fiercely, which angers Dazzler. After recovering, she's disappointed by Galactus' ruthless response. Returning to Earth centuries later, she finds it destroyed. With no other choice, she returns returns to Galactus, realizing she has nowhere else to go after so long. At number 4, what if the Fantastic Four had not gained their powers? In this world, Reed Richards decides to play it safe during their space mission, deciding instead to wait and do the rocket launch by the books with proper shielding. The result being that the trip to space is a success, and the team becomes a big shot in the space industry instead of gaining cool abilities. But surprisingly, that doesn't stop them from taking the heroic path. When Mole Man's monsters strike, the military steps in, but our fearless foursome, Reed, Sue, Johnny, and Ben, aren't deterred. They explore a tunnel beneath their place, and surprise, surprise, even without any superpowers, they outsmart the Mole Man and his creepy creatures. After this, they become old school adventurers, exploring mysteries and going on wild pulp adventures without superpowers. At number 3, what if the Beast had truly become a beast? In this alternate story, Hank's mutation formula made him more savage, turning him into a blue furry creature with a ferocious mind this time. Worried about their friend, Professor X sends Cyclops, Marvel Girl, and Angel to help, but when they find the Beast in Central Park, he attacks them, torn between his animal instincts and warning them away. Then when Professor X shows up, the Beast fights, but manages to hang on to his humanity long enough to surrender. The X-Men can't cure him, so they find him a new home in the Savage Land, where he can be free with Zakar and Zabu, unable to continue on with the X-Men due to his savage nature. At number 2, what if Galactus had turned the Silver Surfer back into Norin Rad? So the Silver Surfer, aka Norin Rad, was longing to return to his home planet Zen-La and reunite with his beloved Shalabal. But here's the twist: Galactus, instead of leaving Norin stranded, turns Shalabal into his new herald called Starglow, erasing her memories of Norin. While Norin, aided by the Fantastic Four, seeks a way back home using the Watcher's technology, Galactus arrives at Zen-La to devour the planet, and Shalabal, now loyal to Galactus, offers herself willingly, hoping to see Nora again. When Norin pleads for an alternative, Galactus grants him his powers back, but confines him to Zen-La as its protector. And coming in at number 1, what if Loki had found Thor's hammer first? In an alternate Marvel universe, Loki grabs hold of Thor's destiny by seizing the stick that transforms Blake into Thor, leading to a domino effect of calamities. By denying Blake access to his power, Loki triggers a series of events, from Thor's demise to Asgard teetering on the brink of destruction. As chaos unfolds, Baldur gets taken out, and Odin's quest to reclaim his son spirals into conflict. Meanwhile, Thor, guided by Baldur and Valhalla, returns to combat Hela's forces. Heimdall and the Warriors 3 hunt for Mjolnir, facing Loki and a dragon blocking their path. Now amidst Asgard's turmoil, Sif steps up, wielding Mjolnir to free Thor and aid in defeating the encroaching armies. Thor redeems himself, helping to fend off the attackers and saving Asgard. And in a moment of reflection, Odin sacrifices an eye to free Baldur, highlighting the cost of redemption and lessons learned.
Number 10, the Fantastic Four as cosmonauts. Let's explore the what if story that begs the question of what if the Fantastic Four were Russian. Well, for starters, their names are different. In fact, they're pretty much all different. Now the UFFF, or the Ultimate Federalist Freedom Fighters, the team is made up of Rudion Richards, the commie Reed Richards, who instead of stretching can just pop off his limbs and send them out over long distances, which is way more alarming. Natalia Romanova, the 616 Black Widow, who is now Widowmaker and can control electromagnetic energy. Pyotr Rasputin, who is still just Colossus and has all those powers except his body and mind are deteriorating over time. And lastly, Pyotr's sister, Ilyana Rasputina, who seems to have the power of Sue Storm, but we only ever see her go invisible, which is way less cool than the 616 continuity. After the demise of Stalin, the team is put under KGB control, and Rudd Richards, easily the strangest member of this team, is not having it, especially after he accidentally ends the life of Giant Man while on a mission for them. Widowmaker then makes widows of the wives of the leaders of the KGB, and the superhero team goes on to fight for freedom and equality. I didn't think that's how it would go, but here we are. Number 9, World War II Space Nick Fury. 1979's What If number 14 gives us a very different approach to history. Instead of World War II being fought in Europe, it's instead fought in space. In this alternate timeline, we discovered interstellar travel much earlier in our history, and as such, the World War II that we fight is more like space sector war between Sector Alpha and Sector Beta in space. And don't ask me to define where those areas are because I can't. It doesn't even tell us. As this is still all set at the same general time as the regular World War II, some of the same characters are gonna be involved, including the original Nick Fury and his Howling Commandos. This story has new high-tech weaponry, fishbowl helmets, and aliens. It's a good bit of fun. Now we learn in the story that Admiral von Strucker is actually working with the alien Axis powers to create a quote master race. So it seems in this alternate world we can master interstellar travel, but we still can't just accept each other's differences. Number 8, Miles Morales becomes Wolverine? In this what if, we don't really get an explanation as to why, but instead of being his normal self, Miles Morales in this world is instead a mutant with the same abilities as Wolverine. And when he is younger, he is abducted alongside other children by Weapon X, who turn him into the adamantium skeleton super weapon, just like the original Wolverine, because of course that's what happens. Now fast forward a few years though, now in this world, Sentinels are being used to hunt down mutants by S.H.I.E.L.D. And after Miles takes out 3 of them, S.H.I.E.L.D. sends in this super cool looking warrior wielding an adamantium katana to take him out. This awesome S.H.I.E.L.D. warrior turns out to be Miles' father, and once he discovers this Wolverine mutant is his son, he turns on S.H.I.E.L.D. So obviously they send another assassin, Miles' uncle Aaron, the original bad guy, who seems to be doomed to be bad no matter what because he is this world's version of Sabretooth. Miles' father defends his son to his dying breath until Miles jumps in to beat Sabretooth to a pulp and almost ends him before his father convinces him not to and to instead be a hero. And then the X-Men show up to recruit Miles, led by Professor X, who is actually Genki Lee, the original Miles' best friend for some reason. It's weird, but it's cool. Number 7, Iron Man the Traitor. In one of the first ever what ifs, when Iron Man is famously captured and forced to create weapons, he still creates the Iron Man armor, but the change comes when instead of booting up and busting his way out of where he is being held captive, the boot up sequence takes just a bit too long, and Yinsen's sacrifice doesn't buy Tony enough time. Tony is found and restrained before he can do anything. Now that he has been found and this new weapon, the Iron Man armor, is discovered, the leader of the terror organization, Chen Lu, plants a device in the arc reactor that keeps Tony alive, but that allows him to shut it off remotely if Tony doesn't do what he says. And he implants a communication device in Tony's skull so that Chen Lu can spy on and control Tony. Then he lets him be discovered and sets him free. Now thanks to the fact that he can now control Tony, he forces him to become a hero like he would have anyways, gain the trust of the superhero community, and then he learns secrets pertaining to S.H.I.E.L.D. But it's once Tony is ordered to dispatch Reed Richards and goes to complete the mission that it's revealed that Tony had been recording a tape by speaking incredibly slowly, and he sent that tape to Reed, who, when he played it at a faster speed because he's super smart, he learned of the situation that Iron Man was in. Once their fight began, Iron Man eventually got, quote, incapacitated by Reed, who actually helped him remove the device inside Tony's heart, giving Tony the chance to get his revenge. Now for a short and somewhat silly what-if story, it's actually really good. Number 6, New Fantastic Four. What If This Was the Fantastic Four is a comic that was a tribute to illustrator Mike Wieringo, who unexpectedly passed away while working on this story. And even if that wasn't the case, it's still actually one of my favorite what ifs. The original Fantastic Four is brought to an end by the Skrull agent Delilah, and in their place, a team of 4 other heroes step up to the plate, if not with a bit of reluctance. Spider-Man, Wolverine, the Incredible Hulk, and Ghost Rider. Now Ben Grimm was the only member of the original team who survived, and at their funeral, he gave this new team his blessing while he went off to raise Franklin Richards. This new team came under attack from cosmic beings who seemed to sense that the Earth lost one of its major teams, but this was all orchestrated by Dr. Doom, as I'm sure no one is too surprised by. Thanks to Ghost Rider's inclusion on this team, Mephisto uses Doom and possesses him, and creates a team of the hero's villains who are power boosted with infernal magic. It's Venom, Abomination, Sabretooth, and Sandman. This fearsome four, as they call themselves, do battle with the new team of Fantastic Four members, eventually being defeated, revealing the Mephisto-possessed Doom, who almost destroys the team until he's stopped by a combined effort of the citizens of New York, and Spider-Man, utilizing the disruptor that finished off the Fantastic Four in the first place, saves the people of New York, saves Dr. Doom, and he saves the day, because it's Spider-Man. Number 5, Dazzler, the Herald of Galactus. Dazzler in Marvel Comics is a super underrated mutant and mega pop star with the power to convert sound into light, which is pretty good for a musician, and especially so since she uses this power to literally dazzle people at her concerts, as well as fight bad guys with a surprising level of power and efficiency. Well, in What If number 33, Dazzler is chosen as the new herald of Galactus, being apparently the only being who could retrieve the old herald who had hidden himself in a black hole. Now Dazzler does this by using her light-based powers, and then Galactus just sends him back into the black hole as like a punishment, I think? It's kind of weird, but this is a What If comic, so just go with it. Dazzler was then given a huge boost with the power Cosmic, and for some reason, even with her new boosted up powers, she decides to keep the disco ball rollerblades. I don't know. She's actually really torn up about having to leave her world, but she does vow to at least do good by not letting Galactus eat inhabited planets, which Galactus actually obliges this time because it seems like he's kinda got the hots for Dazzler. I'm not joking, that's actually kind of the reason. There's a whole conflict with an armada, and then Galactus releases her to go back to Earth, which has been the victim of an apocalypse in her absence, and then she decides to go back to join him yet again as some kind of weird, twisted love story. It's really strange. Number 4, Thaddeus Hulk Ross. So it turns out that if Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross were the one to save Rick Jones from the Gamma Bomb all the way back when, and became irradiated and became the Hulk, he wouldn't last very long, like at all. That's what happens in What If General Ross had become the Hulk. Gamma affects everyone differently, as the Watcher tells us, and for the General, he immediately turned into a Hulk, but retained his intelligence only without being able to speak or handle the situations he was now in properly, like the intelligence was all internal. For example, he accidentally completely squashed Rick Jones. He stopped Igor, the Russian spy who caused the Gamma explosion, but caused untold damage in the process, and while fighting the military, he threw a tank that traveled all the way to the house of Betty Ross, his daughter. The tank he threw crushed the house with Betty inside. He then unknowingly went to find her, as she would be able to help him with the Hulk problem, but all he found was the result of what he had done, and a weeping Bruce Banner. Ross transforms back into his regular human form, which allows Bruce to end the life of this now tormented Ross. This one's kind of depressing. Sorry. Number 3, American Civil War Captain America. I've talked about this one a lot, and I'm sorry. The story of What If Captain America starts out with our Steve Rogers and Bucky Barnes time displaced to the Civil War era. Bucky is the commander of their regiment, and he is not a good guy. Apart from being an unhealthy amount of racist, he has quite the lack of moral compass as well. Now our Steve Rogers here obviously starts out as his scrawny and less than impressive self, but with a heart of gold that shines through. Now after sustaining injuries from not following Bucky's dastardly orders, he is recovering in a nearby Union camp tended to by one Private Samuel Wilson, this timeline's version of the Falcon, taken in by the Shawnee tribe at a very young age. Sensing the goodness in Steve's heart, Wilson bestows a kind of eagle animal spirit thing on Mr. Rogers that changes you on the outside to whatever you are on the inside, if that makes any sense. And this happens just as James Barnes bursts into their location to bring them down. Now the power of this ritual blasts Barnes away, and when he recovers, he has become the White Skull, with like literally, he's the skull. And Steve has become a mystical super soldier wielding a shield and sporting a headdress. Now he goes on to save presidents and wars and leave a lasting legacy of Captain and General Americas that continues all the way up until the modern day. Number 2, Ghost Stroller Rider. What If the Watcher was a stand-up comedian is honestly the What If comic that just keeps on giving. It's pretty awesome. There are tons of weird and wild parts in this comic, but for this point, there is a full page devoted to the question of what if the Ghost Rider had possessed someone other than Johnny Blaze. And of course, instead of finding some other able-bodied man or woman, a cigarette-smoking, leather vest-wearing comedian Watcher shows us the spirit of vengeance inhabiting the body of an elderly woman in a wheelchair demanding warm milk, a rollerblade-wearing woman vowing to bring an end to disco, and an infant in a stroller. A big-headed goo-goo gaga who will hunt for vengeance after it finds someone to change its diaper. And just to make it 10 times better, this wee bab is wielding a cat, swinging it around its head as it zooms around in its Hellfire stroller. I honestly can't make it up, it's actually on the page. And finally, in at number 1, it's heroic Dr. Doom. what would a good guy version of one of the strongest, most quotable, and most villainous villains in the pages of Marvel Comics look like? Well, other than the infamous Iron Man, in issue 22 of What If, we get to see just that. When the Victor Von Doom of this universe discovers Reed Richards looking over his experimental notes, uninvited in university, he diverts from the regular continuity, which normally sees Doom fly off into a rage and make Reed leave. Instead, Von Doom invites Reed Richards to help him out, which I think a true scientist would actually do. Now, with Reed's help, Victor is able to contact his mother in the afterlife, and he learns of his royal blood. He trains in the advanced technology and mystical arts of an order of monks in Tibet and in the darkest places of sorcery, and is granted, instead of his classic armor, this really sweet golden armor, which is kind of evocative of like medieval knights, but also kind of like the Roman Empire a little bit. Or maybe that's just my male brain talking, I don't know. He uses his knowledge to free his mother's soul from the realm of Mephisto, and uses his technology and sorcery to free his kingdom from an oppressive ruler, and all goes really well. Until Mephisto comes back demanding the soul of his lover, Valeria, in exchange for the freedom of his people. Then he battles Mephisto once every year to try and save his love, similar to how he does the same for his mother in the normal continuity, only now he's widely seen as a hero. First appearing in Edge of Spider-Geddon number 4 from September of 2018, following along with the first 3 issues, which all introduced us to a single alternate Spider-Man each, this story picks up reciting a letter written by none other than Peter Parker to his best friend, Harry Osborne. In this letter, read out over the course of the issue, Peter basically explains how if this letter is being read, then it means he has bit the dust, and that Norman, Harry's father, is responsible. Pete also reveals that both Harry and himself have been working against Norman from inside of Oscorp, Peter on the science side and Harry on the corporate side of things. As Pete is telling Harry that Norman is probably onto him, and that if Harry goes after him he should sneak in, Harry is decidedly not sneaking into Oscorp. He's walking right in the front door and going up the elevator, taking out several guards in the process, all while being watched by his 6-armed, sinister spider father on security cameras. We are actually given no information about how Norman gained these powers, assuming it was a spider, but he has them, and his costume is actually really cool, with a helmet instead of a mask that looks kind of like a big bicycle helmet. I know that doesn't sound cool, but I like this look. I kind of want to know what you guys think, so let me know down below. Anyways, according to Peter, Norman has been pouring an enormous amount of resources into a super secret project. He has put his science team, which included Peter, on the task of refining Peter's old web fluid project, making the web super strong, but also with a degree of plasticity. Norman also had others running tests about the breakdown of string theory in relation to, and I quote, timey-wimey alternate reality stuff. I don't know. While Peter theorizes this is for some kind of way to bungee jump through time and space, he's not really wrong. In reality, Spider-Norman has acquired a cosmic cube, but one that is warped and broken, giving him a window into multiple different realities. Now, realizing that Norman is putting all of this time and effort into this endeavor, Harry and Peter are essentially trying to weaken Oscorp. Harry infiltrates Oscorp and he manages to get his hands on this reality's version of the Kobold suit, aka the Green Goblin armor. Only here, it's silver and really cool. Now, with the suit, Harry makes his way to the Cosmic Cube. Harry and Spider-Norman face off, with Norman pretty readily besting his own son, but Harry still was able to fire off a laser while on the ropes that missed Norman, sure, but it hit the cube instead, destroying it. While this seems like a win, it actually gave Spider-Norman exactly what he wanted, and this opened up the web of life and destiny. But this is when, pretty much out of nowhere, Spider-Punk appears, taking Spider-Norman with him. Now, Spider-Punk showed up to grab Norman in order to bring him into the Spider-Geddon event that follows the Spider-Verse event. The Inheritors managed to revive themselves using Superior Spider-Man's, aka Doc Ock's, cloning vats. The multiversal Spider-Men split up into 2 squads, one led by Superior Spider-Man, who are all very much okay with taking the lives of the Inheritors. The multiversal Spider-Men split up into 2 squads, one led by Superior Spider-Man, who are all very much okay with taking the lives of the Inheritors to win the conflict, and the other squad being led by Miles Morales, and who are a little bit more morally positive. Now, as you can imagine, Spider-Norman is very much on the side of Superior Spider-Man here. Although, Spider-Norman, being Norman Osborn, isn't really down with taking orders, and so he and Otto are constantly fighting each other for the right to lead. Norman and Spiders-Man, the Spider-Man made up of thousands of little tiny spiders, on the other hand, are getting along swimmingly, and they actually splinter off from Otto's group, planning to trap the Inheritors on Earth 616, sacrificing the main Marvel Universe in order to beat the enemy. Following that plan, Norman and Spiders-Man head to Loom World and destroy it completely, with Spiders-Man sending one of his spiders to a ton of alternate realities, and Norman cutting off a piece of the web of life and destiny, giving him the ability to travel to any alternate Earth that he wants to. Now for the rest of the Spider-Geddon event, both Norman and Spiders-Man basically just disappear. The next time we see the sinister duo is in Superior Spider-Man Volume 2, and all the way in issue number 9, where we learn that they have been secretly spying on Otto Octavius as he is living his Superior Spider-Man life in San Francisco. This pair secretly leaked the fact that the San Francisco Spider-Man is actually Otto Octavius to the public, trying to ruin his reputation and get their revenge. Or it's more like Norman is trying to get his revenge and just using Spiders-Man to do so, which was a mistake.
I really love this approach for Rogue's character. I gotta say, I already love what they did with Pixie in this reality. Instead of looking fairy-like, has dragon-like wings. There's just a lot of cool versions of characters. Basilisk too, super cool. After the battle is done, the Force Warriors arrive and rebuild the barriers that were destroyed, as they are destroyed every day, of course, before the battle ends up happening. This group is a team of 5 elite mutants who are kept mostly off the battlefield and focus purely on rebuilding defenses each and every day. Sound familiar? Kinda sounds like a group that may have helped to inspire the 5 of Krakoa from the modern day main continuity. Among the Force Warriors ranks are David Haller, Hellion, Betsy Braddock Psylocke, Carmela Uncione Standoff, and finally Rachel Summers Revenant. As most people fall back to the fortress to unwind after the long, hard day of fighting, we get to look at what their relationships are like. Storm is with Namor in this reality, both bonding over being basically godlike monarchs. Cyclops' Basilisk is with Frenzy. Iceman and Psylocke are an item in here. The other thing we learn is that Wolverine can no longer fight, as using his powers will actually trigger a bomb within him, which is full of the X-Gene cure that Rao once worked on. But apparently he did survive up until this point, so hey, that's something. I honestly wasn't expecting that after we got the story of how he basically gets captured after trying to remove the X-Gene cure. We also learn a bit of the world, and how the Phoenix losing control is basically what triggered this reality. At least that's what it seems so far. Gambit and the other mutants think back on old times and what their lives were like before the war broke out. Some wonder if they would have ever been friends had they come together without the unifying cause of mutant survival, or if things could have been different if they had come together earlier. Gambit, however, doesn't believe that what happened here is unavoidable, even if the mutants had come together before. Interesting considering the history we know from Earth 616. Previously as well in Toad's story about how Magneto saved all the mutants who were in the Chrysler building, we also learn of how the humans at one point attempted to trick mutants into gathering at a fake safe house in Westchester, but how this was a trap and the safe house was burned down with all the mutants who came to find refuge there supposedly still trapped inside. Sound familiar? Sounds familiar. Woo! That's a interesting take on that. While Legacy is taking her time to return to the fortress, called onto the field for Tempo's last rites and still processing all the memories she just took in, it's revealed that the barrier has actually had a breach. The breach, however, was not a human team seemingly attempting to infiltrate Magneto's fortress, but instead was another mutant. One that has been kept as an inmate within the brig in this supposed mutant safe haven. Although it's a mutant safe haven, but they have a prison that has mutants in it, with this mutant's powers being deemed too unstable. None other than Catherine Pride, who supposedly returned from outside the mutants' encampment and is retrieved by Magneto and given back a helmet to block her powers and prevent her from turning intangible. Magneto says that this occurrence should be kept secret from the others, worried about morale. He also says he will ask Catherine why she was out there when she regains consciousness, with her having been knocked unconscious by the mutants that responded. As Magneto flies off to return Catherine to the brig and the AI mutant Danger, who runs the brig, Legacy retrieves a camera that she noticed Catherine had been holding before she was attacked, and it was knocked out of her hand, going unnoticed by the rest of the mutants. Legacy does not know why she wants to keep this discovery to herself and not share it with the others, but she ultimately chooses to explore this solo, and finds all the pictures on the camera are, mysteriously, blank. she decides to take the camera to this universe's version of Madison Jeffries, a technopath. Madison agrees to help his friend Legacy, interviewing the camera about the photos that it contains, and later allowing Legacy to kiss him so that she can borrow some of his powers. Legacy then infiltrates the brig after attempting to convince Magneto to just let her interrogate Catherine herself, to no avail. While Catherine doesn't have much to say about her adventure outside of the boundaries of the fortress, Legacy, after being caught by danger, ends up running into another, even more mysterious prison in the brig, the Professor. As he is seemingly comatose, Legacy uses her powers to look into the mind of the Professor, and also ends up tapping into his power as well, tapping into the minds of basically every other mutant nearby and accidentally causing some, like Magneto, to even suffer seizures. Who is this Professor, and what really caused the existence of this alternate reality known as Age of X? Legacy seeks answers after being forced to go on the run, but will she get them? Well, you'll have to wait to see, because that's about it for this one.
On the alternate world of Earth 71928, when Peter Parker was bit by the radioactive spider, his motif was a little bit different. The spider that bit Peter here just so happened to be a Steatodia nobilis, also known as the Noble False Widow. This spider just so happens to have a very distinctive pattern on its rear end that is often mistaken or likened to the shape of a skull. So of course, when Peter creates his Spider-Man suit, he uses a large skull logo alongside his spider logo, and it just so happens to be exactly like that of the Punisher. Other than that small change to the costume, after Peter is bit, he goes about a very similar path as the 616 continuity self. He discovers his powers, joins up in some underground wrestling matches, creates his own web shooters, and loves his aunt and uncle. He even still lets the robber that takes the life of Uncle Ben get away when they first encounter each other. The big difference to this tale comes when Peter confronts the thief in the warehouse like he does in the main continuity. Now, using the same iron that took Ben's life, Peter causes the passing of the burglar and was simultaneously captured on camera red-handed. While J. Jonah Jameson and the papers painted him as a criminal, Peter continued to try to capture or knock out criminals instead of resorting to loss of life. He captured pictures of himself fighting crime just like he does normally, and he made a living doing so. The problem for this Peter was that no matter what he did, superpowered villains would always come back for revenge, having learned and adapted each time they did so. The worst of these was naturally the Green Goblin. After many times observing the Goblin at work, Peter discovered that the Goblin armor was reactive when hit with the penetrative force of a bullet. When one hit the armor, it would cause an outward micro-explosion that negated the force impacting it, while being backed by ballistic fibers that also helped him out. While this did save the Goblin temporarily, the suit would need to be repaired before he could take the hit again. Now, I did say that Peter tried to knock out or capture his foes, but this Peter had a much colder personality, and he only tried that approach to crime fighting. After observing the Goblin, Peter upgraded his web shooters with several different types of ammunition, from high explosive and armor piercing to incendiary and EMP. He was much more okay with letting criminals end each other's lives, but then it was his turn. The first time he tested out these new additions to his arsenal was against the Sinister Six, who made a big mistake when they threatened Peter's loved ones. Peter's EMP rounds did wonders against Electro. He let his explosive rounds take down Kraven the Hunter. He pulled no punches when facing Mysterio, like at all. He turned Sandman into shattered glass with his incendiary rounds, ripped off the power source for Vulture's wings and just let him fall, and armor piercing rounds did wonders against Dr. Octopus's arms. He put the entire Sinister Six 6 feet under. The fear in the eyes of Aunt May was all that he needed to know that he could never reveal who he was to anyone. The pictures Peter took of the altercation made it to the papers and caused an immediate nosedive in the rate of criminal activity, because, let's be honest, a guy like Spider-Man running around completely ending the lives of criminals would be absolutely terrifying and very effective. Now, Peter carried on with his life. He started at Empire State University, met Harry Osborne and Gwen Stacy, his first love interest. But as he transitioned from fighting crime as much to being a college student, his absence brought the rise of crime back again, as criminals vied for control and authority on the streets of New York City. While innocents were sometimes caught in the crossfire, for the most part, criminals were taking each other out, except for the Kingpin, who Peter told us, quote, almost consolidated things, but Peter, quote, made sure that he now consolidates only in hell, which is a cold line from our friendly neighborhood Spider-Man.